I still remember the first time I met Mark. It was in college, at a small get-together hosted by a mutual friend. I wasn't expecting much from the evening, just a few casual conversations with people I didn't know well. But then he walked in. Tall, confident, with a smile that lit up the room. I had no idea that this one night would change the course of my life forever. Mark wasn't just charming, he had this way of making everyone feel special, like they were the most important person in the room. We hit it off almost immediately. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our dreams, the little quirks that made us who we were. For the first time, I felt like I had found someone who truly understood me. That night, he asked for my number, and I gave it to him without hesitation. In the weeks that followed, we spent more and more time together. Coffee dates turned into long walks around campus, and soon, our conversations became the highlight of my day. There was a connection between us that felt undeniable, something deeper than just shared interests or chemistry. It was as if we were two pieces of a puzzle that had been waiting to fit together. I had never believed in love at first sight, but with Mark, it felt like it was possible. We laughed together, dreamed together, and supported each other through the challenges that life threw our way. He was there when I struggled with my studies, and I was there when he faced the pressure of his internship applications. It felt natural, easy, like this was how things were always meant to be. Our relationship quickly became serious. After a year of dating, we moved in together. The transition was smooth, comfortable, even. We had our own little world. We decorated our apartment with mismatched furniture and framed photos of our travels. Every corner of that apartment was filled with memories we had created together. Our love felt like it was built on a foundation of shared moments and quiet understanding. I was happy, and for the first time, I felt like I had found someone I could spend the rest of my life with. A year later, Mark proposed. It wasn't an extravagant proposal. It was simple and intimate, just the two of us in the park where we had spent many afternoons talking about our hopes and dreams. He pulled out a ring, and I remember the way my heart raced. It wasn't a surprise, but it was perfect. I said yes without hesitation. We were so young, but we both knew this was the next step in our journey together. We married 6 months later. The ceremony was small, just close family and friends. It was everything I had ever wanted, a day filled with love, joy, and laughter. Mark looked at me the way every bride hopes her partner will, with a look of admiration and pure affection. I was his world, and he was mine. We promised to grow old together, to face whatever challenges life would throw our way, and to always put each other first. In the beginning, I thought we were invincible. Our relationship was strong. Our love was strong. We supported each other, celebrated each other's successes, and leaned on each other during tough times. I was content. I thought that was enough. But looking back, I realize I didn't see the cracks starting to form beneath the surface. It's strange how sometimes you don't notice the subtle changes, the little shifts that happen when you're too caught up in the rhythm of everyday life. I should have seen it. I should have noticed the way Mark started to withdraw, the way he became more distant. But at the time, I was too absorbed in our life, in our future, to notice that the dream we were building was starting to crumble. I thought everything was perfect. But sometimes, perfection can be the most fragile thing of all. It started off so subtly, I didn't even realize it at first. Mark was still the same person I had married, charming, kind, but something was off. The first hint was small, almost imperceptible. It was a Friday evening, and we had planned to have a quiet night in. We were both tired from the week, and I had looked forward to spending time together, just the two of us. But when I got home from work, Mark wasn't there. It wasn't unusual for him to stay late at work sometimes, especially when a big project was on the horizon, so I thought little of it. But as the evening stretched on and he didn't text or call, a nagging feeling began to stir in the pit of my stomach. I made dinner, ate alone, and waited for him to come home. Around midnight, he walked in, his shirt untucked and his hair slightly disheveled, as if he had rushed in from somewhere. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, said he was sorry for being late, and walked past me to the bedroom. I remember how I stood there, half expecting him to apologize or explain where he had been, but he didn't. It was like something had shifted in him. He didn't ask about my day, didn't seem interested in the dinner I had prepared, and even when I tried to make small talk, his responses were short, distant. It was as if he was somewhere else, emotionally. The conversation felt forced, and the night ended quietly, with him retreating into the bedroom to fall asleep almost immediately, leaving me wide awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where things had gone wrong. The following weeks saw more of the same. I'd ask about his day, and he would give me one-word answers, as if I was bothering him. He started to stay out late more often, and when I asked him about it, he would assure me it was work or that he was just hanging out with friends. He wasn't lying, not exactly. But there was always something off about his tone, like he wasn't fully present, even when he was physically there. One night, I decided to wait up for him. I wasn't proud of it, but something in me knew that I had to do it. When the clock struck 2 a.m., I heard the familiar click of the door unlocking. Mark stumbled in, his shirt wrinkled and his eyes slightly glazed over. I felt a knot form in my chest. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't mad, at least, not yet. But I needed to understand. "I was with some friends," he replied quickly, but there was something in his eyes that made me suspicious. There was a distance in his gaze, like he wasn't really seeing me. I decided not to press the issue then, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that something wasn't adding up. Mark and I used to do everything together. We'd watch movies, talk about our days, plan for our future. But now, we were just passing through each other's lives, barely acknowledging the person we had once been. The following week, I came across something that would change everything. I was cleaning up our bedroom when I noticed his phone lying on the bed. Mark had always been protective of his phone, which was fine with me. I didn't feel the need to snoop, but this time, something urged me to pick it up. He had left it unlocked, and I knew he would never leave it like that unless something was different. I scrolled through his messages, not expecting to find anything alarming. But then I saw it, texts between him and Claire, his ex-girlfriend. At first, I thought it was just a fluke, maybe some harmless catch-up. But as I read more, the tone of their conversation shifted. They talked about their past, old memories, inside jokes, shared experiences. It wasn't just casual. There was an emotional connection still there. And as I scrolled through the texts, I realized that the way they spoke to each other wasn't how someone would speak to just a friend. There were flirtations, lingering words that suggested something more than friendship. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I waited for Mark to come home and confronted him. He was quiet at first, then told me that he had been reconnecting with Claire. "It's nothing, Emma," he said, his voice too calm, too collected. "We've been talking about the past, about closure." But the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't looking for closure, he was looking for something more. And that's when it hit me. The subtle changes I had brushed off for weeks weren't just signs of stress or a phase. They were signs of something much worse. Mark wasn't just emotionally distant, he was falling back into the past, into a relationship he once had with Claire. And in doing so, he was slowly, quietly, replacing me. It was a Saturday afternoon when it all came crashing down. I had been putting it off for days, but the curiosity, the doubt gnawing at me, had reached a boiling point. Mark had gone out for one of his friend gatherings, those late-night hangouts I had learned to stop questioning. He'd told me earlier that he'd be home by dinner, but I knew better than to hold my breath. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone mindlessly, but my thoughts kept drifting to the texts I had seen on his phone the previous week. The way he had denied everything so easily, his words too rehearsed. I wasn't sure if I had believed him, but something deep inside told me that I was only fooling myself. That nagging feeling in my gut was now more like a constant, dull ache. I stood up, feeling an unfamiliar sense of urgency as I made my way to our bedroom. Mark's phone was charging on the nightstand, his jacket tossed carelessly over the chair beside the bed. The room felt colder, emptier, as I walked over to the dresser and pulled open the drawer where we kept our important documents, our insurance, some bills, and a few other things I never really paid attention to. I pushed aside the papers, rifling through the contents with shaking hands, when I noticed something strange, a photo album, buried under a pile of receipts and old birthday cards. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled it out. It wasn't one of the albums we'd put together over the years. This one was different. This one was from his past. I opened it, my eyes scanning the pages that were filled with pictures of Mark and Claire, his ex-girlfriend, smiling and laughing in what seemed like another lifetime. They were happy in a way that made my chest tighten. I flipped through the pages quickly, each photo a slap to my chest, until I reached the final few pages. There, hidden behind the last photo, was a small stack of pictures, their edges yellowed with age. The first photo made my heart stop, Mark and Claire, wrapped in each other's arms, smiling as if the world revolved around them. They were at a concert, their faces lit up with joy, and there was no mistaking the intimacy between them. The love in their eyes was real, and for the first time, I realized how deep their connection had been. I took a sharp breath, my eyes scanning the next photo. It was a candid shot of Mark, looking younger but still the same, his arms around Claire, both of them sitting on the hood of a car, their laughter frozen in time. There was something about it that hurt more than I expected. Something about the way they were so comfortable with each other, so at ease. It was a look I hadn't seen in Mark's eyes for a long time. I had never seen him look at me that way. But it was the last photo that shattered me. It was a picture of Claire, alone this time, but the background was unmistakable. It was taken in our living room. My stomach lurched, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. The couch, the decor, the plants. It was all the same. Mark and Claire had been here. In our home. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. He had been lying to me, not just with his words, but with his actions. These pictures weren't just memories from his past. They were a part of his present, proof that Claire had never really left his life. And all the while, I had been too blinded by my trust in him to see it. I felt nauseous, my hands trembling as I closed the album and stuffed it back in the drawer. I wanted to scream, to throw everything away, to make it stop. But I knew it was too late for that. The damage was done. I walked back to the living room, trying to steady my breath, my mind racing. I couldn't let him walk back in here without confronting him. I had to know the truth, fully, completely. No more lies. No more excuses. But as I sat there, waiting for Mark to return, I realized something else. Even if I did confront him, even if he told me everything, it might not be enough to fix what had been broken. The trust we had built, the life we had shared, it was all based on something false, something that had been crumbling for a long time. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces, unsure of where to start. The woman I thought I was, the life I had imagined for myself, felt so far away now. It was as if everything I had known had been swept away, leaving nothing but a gaping hole. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend that it wasn't happening. Mark came home later that evening, as usual. I had barely moved from my spot on the couch, my mind running through every possible scenario, every question I needed to ask him. The sound of the front door unlocking was almost deafening, my heart pounding in my chest. He walked in, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't rise to greet him. I just sat there, my gaze fixed on him, waiting. He looked surprised to see me still awake. "Hey," he said, sounding almost cheerful, as if everything was fine. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." He hung up his jacket and started to head toward the kitchen. I didn't respond right away. I just watched him, my mind working faster than my heart could process. He knew something was different. He could feel it, too. "Mark," I finally said, my voice steady but low. "We need to talk." He froze mid-step, his hand hovering over the fridge door. His posture tensed, his face suddenly guarded. About what? His voice was a little too casual, too dismissive, and it made my blood run cold. I took a deep breath. This was it. I wasn't going to let him sidestep this any longer. I found the photo album. The one with you and Claire. There was a brief silence, but in that silence, I could feel the tension thickening between us. He turned around slowly, his face betraying nothing, though his eyes flickered with uncertainty. Emma, I told you, he started, but I cut him off, my voice sharp now, louder than I had intended. No, you didn't tell me. You didn't tell me everything. You didn't tell me that you've been holding on to these memories. You didn't tell me that you've been hiding them from me. And you certainly didn't tell me that you've been talking to her, your ex. I stood up now, feeling the anger rising in me, a combination of hurt and betrayal that I could no longer contain. You've been lying to me, Mark. You've been lying about where you were going, about who you were seeing. And all the while, I've been here, waiting for you to come home, thinking I was the one you wanted. He opened his mouth to say something, but I wasn't done. You weren't just reconnecting with her. You've been replacing me with her. You're not in the past anymore, Mark, you're right here, in our home, and you're making a choice. You chose her. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. His eyes darkened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something, guilt, maybe? But it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. Emma, you don't understand, he said, his voice cracking slightly, though he was trying hard to maintain control. It wasn't like that. Claire and I, there was unfinished business. We were trying to get closure, that's all. You can't understand what that's like. You're right, I replied, my voice trembling with the force of my emotions. I don't understand. I don't understand how you could look me in the eyes every day and pretend everything was okay while you were reaching out to someone else. I don't understand how you could betray me like this. His face softened then, his eyes filling with something that resembled regret, but the words he spoke next only made things worse. I never meant to hurt you, Emma. I never thought it would get this far. His voice was quieter now, more vulnerable, but there was a tone of justification in it that made my blood boil. I still love you, you know that, right? My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I almost believed him. But the memories, the photos, the lies, it all came rushing back. You don't love me, Mark, I whispered, the pain in my voice impossible to hide. Not the way I deserve to be loved. Not the way I loved you. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I saw the man I thought I knew, a stranger now. You've made your choice, and you've already shown me where your heart lies. It's not here anymore. It's with her. And I'm done pretending it's not. He took a step toward me, his eyes pleading, but I held up my hand to stop him. No, Mark. No more lies. No more pretending. We're done. The words hung in the air between us, final and heavy. He looked at me, searching my face as if looking for a way out, but there was nothing left to say. I turned away from him then, my heart breaking in ways I hadn't known were possible. I had trusted him with everything. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces, to find my way forward without him. He stood there for a long time, silent, but I didn't look back. The door had already closed, and this time, I knew it was for good. The days following that night were a blur. I didn't sleep much, and when I did, my dreams were plagued with images of Mark and Claire, their faces constantly haunting me, reminders of the love I thought was mine but had never truly been. The house felt colder now, emptier, like something precious had been taken and I didn't know how to fill the void. I packed my things slowly, methodically, as though moving through an unfamiliar routine. The idea of leaving felt both terrifying and liberating. I was scared, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had been trapped for too long. Trapped in a marriage where my worth had been questioned, where love had been replaced with secrets and lies. But I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. I didn't need Mark to define me. I didn't need his approval or his love to know who I was. I had spent so many years questioning myself, doubting my own instincts, but this time, I wasn't going to let his actions dictate my future. I called my best friend, Sarah, who immediately came over to help me with the final stages of packing. She was the one person who had always supported me, who knew me better than anyone. "You're doing the right thing, Emma," she said softly as she helped me box up the last of my things. "You deserve better than him. You deserve someone who values you, who sees you for everything you are." I smiled weakly, though her words warmed me. They didn't fix the hurt, but they gave me a glimpse of hope, a glimmer that perhaps, after all of this pain, there could still be something beautiful waiting for me on the other side. By the time the last box was loaded into the car, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going back to the house I had shared with Mark. I wasn't going back to a life of lies and broken promises. It was time for me to rebuild, to start anew. I found an apartment in the city, a cozy little place that felt like a fresh start. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that was enough. The first night I spent there, I stood in the living room, looking out the window at the city lights. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't hear from Mark for a while after that. I expected the silence, but when I did finally hear from him, it was a text, short and cold, asking if I had left him for good. The text was a slap in the face, but in that moment, I realized that I didn't need to answer him. His words no longer had the power to hurt me. The following months were difficult, but they were also some of the most empowering of my life. I focused on my career, rekindling old friendships, and discovering parts of myself I had long forgotten. I took up hobbies I had neglected, like painting, and I even began traveling, something I had always wanted to do but had put off for years. Then, one evening, I met someone new. It wasn't planned, it wasn't expected, but it happened. His name was James, and he was kind and patient, everything Mark had never been. He never rushed me, never pressured me, and most importantly, he never tried to fill the emptiness left by Mark. James understood that I needed time, that I needed space to heal. We spent a lot of time talking, getting to know each other, and slowly, I began to trust again. But this time, I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to sacrifice myself or my happiness for someone else's. With James, I found something new, a relationship built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care. One afternoon, a few months after we started seeing each other, I was sitting at a cafe when I saw Mark walk by. He didn't see me at first, but when he did, his eyes locked onto mine, and for a brief moment, I saw the familiar guilt in his eyes. He hesitated, as if wanting to say something, but then he turned and walked away. And just like that, I realized something. Mark was no longer a part of my story. I had let go. I had moved on. As I watched him disappear into the distance, I felt no bitterness, no anger. What I felt was liberation, finally free from the chains of a past that had held me back for far too long. I wasn't the same person who had cried herself to sleep, who had doubted her worth. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the future held. This time, I was living for me. And that was all I needed to know. Subscribe to our channel for powerful real stories that touch your heart. Join a community where emotions run deep and every story brings a new perspective. Don't miss out, hit that bell for weekly updates.